August 2nd, 1776. The windows are shut against the summer heat. The air is thick and still. Outside, the city moves. Inside this room, no one does. 56 men are gathered. Some shift in their chairs. Some stare straight ahead. Some study the floor. They all know what is about to happen. At the head of the table sits the President of the Continental Congress, John Hancock. He reaches for the quill. He does not hesitate. But in this moment, this single, irreversible moment, everything he is, everything he owns, everything he has built across 40 years of careful, deliberate accumulation stands on the edge of annihilation. Because this is not just ink on parchment. This is treason. High treason against the most powerful empire on earth. And John Hancock is not a poor farmer with nothing to lose. He is not an unknown radical hoping to disappear into the crowd. He is the richest man in New England. A merchant prince, the most wanted smuggler in the British Empire. A man the crown has been trying to destroy for nearly a decade. His ships, his fortune, his mansion on Beacon Hill, his very life. All of it forfeit if this fails. He dips the quill, and then with deliberate, unhurried precision, he writes his name. Large, bold, unmistakable, as if daring King George himself to read it without his spectacles. In that moment, John Hancock is not just signing a document. He is signing his own death warrant. And he knows it. To understand what Hancock risked, you have to understand what he had. He was born in 1737 in Braintree, Massachusetts, the son of a minister, modest circumstances, unremarkable beginnings. His father died when John was 9. The boy was sent to live with his uncle, Thomas Hancock, the richest merchant in the colonies. Thomas Hancock was a man who had built an empire from almost nothing. Ships and warehouses and trade routes that stretched across the Atlantic. Fine cloth and wine from Europe. New England rum and whale oil going back. A granite mansion on Beacon Hill. The finest address in Boston. Young John watched. He learned. He absorbed the mechanics of wealth. How to read a ledger. How to read a room. How to read the difference between a risk worth taking and one that would break you. When Thomas died in 1764, he left everything to his nephew. Ships, warehouses, thousands of acres of land, a fortune estimated at £70,000. Overnight, at 27 years old, John Hancock became one of the wealthiest men in British North America. But wealth in the colonies came with strings, British strings, the Navigation Acts, the Sugar Act, the Townshend Acts, a web of taxation and restriction designed to ensure that colonial merchants enriched London first and themselves second. Men like Hancock found ways around them. Smuggling was not crime in the eyes of most colonists. It was commerce. French molasses, Dutch tea, Madeira wine, goods that kept Boston's distilleries and dinner tables running, moving in the shadows of British oversight. Hancock was one of the best in the business. In May 1768, one of Hancock's ships sailed into Boston Harbor. Her name was the Liberty. She was carrying Madeira wine. Hancock declared the cargo. Customs officers boarded, inspected, cleared her. Weeks later, one official changed his story. He claimed the crew had unloaded most of the wine at night before the inspection, that they had locked him below deck while they did it, that Hancock had cheated the crown, again. On June 10th, under the guns of the British warship Romney, officials seized the Liberty. What happened next was not a legal dispute. It was a riot. 3,000 Bostonians swarmed the wharf. They beat the customs men. They cut the tow ropes. They chased the officials through the streets until the mob finally spent itself. The Liberty was towed away, condemned, and later burned by patriots in Rhode Island. Hancock was charged with smuggling. £9,000 in penalties, a sum that could have ruined most men. John Adams took the case. The evidence was thin. The charges eventually collapsed. But something had shifted. The British were no longer simply watching John Hancock. They were hunting him. Not because he was desperate, not because he was poor, but because he was rich, visible, and defiant. And men like that, if left unchecked, gave other men ideas. Hancock could have retreated, paid what was owed, kept his head down and his ships moving. He chose the opposite. By the early 1770s, Hancock had stepped fully into politics. He was elected to the Massachusetts legislature, then to the provincial Congress. There he found Samuel Adams. Adams was everything Hancock was not. Radical, ascetic, a failed brewer turned firebrand pamphleteer. Where Hancock moved through the world in fine coats and polished buckles, Adams wore threadbare clothes and argued in print. Adams wrote the words. Hancock paid the bills. Their alliance was uneasy and electric. Adams needed Hancock's money and social standing to legitimize the cause. Hancock needed Adams's fire to give his fortune purpose. Together, they turned Boston into the beating heart of resistance. By 1775, British General Thomas Gage had received specific orders. Arrest 2 men, Samuel Adams and John Hancock. Not because they commanded armies, not because they had fired shots, but because they commanded influence. An influence, the British had learned, was more dangerous than muskets. In April of 1775, Hancock and Adams were staying in Lexington when Paul Revere rode out of the dark with a warning. British troops were marching from Boston. They escaped hours before the Redcoats arrived. The troops found the Lexington militia instead. Shots were fired. The war had begun. And John Hancock, the merchant, the smuggler, the richest man in New England, was now formally an enemy of the crown with no way back. In May 1775, the Second Continental Congress convened in Philadelphia. They needed a president, someone wealthy enough to lend the body credibility, respected enough to hold fractious men together, visible enough to matter. They chose Hancock unanimously. At 38, he became the most powerful civilian in the American cause. He presided over a body that was part legislature, part war cabinet. He signed orders for gunpowder. He negotiated with foreign agents. He chaired the Marine Committee that would one day become the United States Navy. And all the while, British agents continued to hunt him. Then came the summer of 1776. The Declaration had been approved on the 4th of July. The fair copy, the one meant for signatures, lay on the table on August 2nd. Hancock understood the document better than most, not as philosophy, not as poetry, but as a transaction, a statement that there was no negotiation left, no reconciliation possible, no return, only victory or ruin. The British had already accepted Hancock and Adams from any possible pardon. His name was already on their list. Signing the Declaration was not going to make his situation worse. What it would do was make his position permanent. He signed first. He did not need to make his name large. His handwriting was naturally bold, theatrical, deliberate. But in that moment, the flourish carried weight beyond penmanship. He was telling the king, clearly in large letters without the possibility of misreading, that there was no distance between John Hancock and this idea, that he was not hiding behind collective action or anonymous solidarity, that he personally was putting his name, his fortune, and his life behind the proposition that America would be free. If he was going to risk everything, he was going to make it impossible to overlook. The war years exacted their toll. Hancock poured his remaining wealth into the cause, loans and supplies and support for widows and families of men who had nothing. His shipping empire fractured. The life he had built before the Revolution, the carefully constructed world of trade and influence and comfort, was consumed. He left Congress in 1777 exhausted, his health already breaking down. Gout that would cripple him for the rest of his life. A failed militia campaign at Newport, a body worn by years of pressure and risk and the weight of consequence. And yet, in 1780, Massachusetts elected him their first governor. He would serve, with one brief interruption, until his death. As governor, Hancock proved something surprising. The man who had built his fortune by bending rules proved a steady, moderate leader. He pardoned rebels after Shays' Rebellion. He freed the few enslaved people his uncle had owned. He funded schools. He supported the poor. And in 1788, he rose from his sickbed to deliver the speech that helped tip the Massachusetts ratifying convention in favor of the United States Constitution. The man who had risked everything to start a nation used his last reserves to hold it together. John Hancock died on October 8, 1793. Still governor, still in the Beacon Hill mansion where his uncle had raised him. 56 years old, his funeral was the largest Boston had ever seen. We remember the signature, we forget the gamble. History has a way of simplifying people, reducing a life to a single image, a single moment. For Hancock, that moment is the oversized flourish at the bottom of a yellowing document, a curiosity, a punchline about King George and spectacles. But that signature is not a curiosity. It is a window into the mind of a man who had spent his life calculating risk, who understood better than anyone in that room exactly what he was throwing away. Ships, silver, safety. The world he had been born to inherit. And he signed first. Not reluctantly, not anonymously, not because he had nothing left to lose, but because he understood something that is easy to say and almost impossible to actually do. That if you believe in something enough to risk everything, you don't get to hedge. You don't get to sign small. You sign your name so large that it cannot be ignored, cannot be qualified, cannot be walked back, and you live with what comes next. America did not just gain a declaration that August day in Philadelphia. It gained a precedent that those with the most to lose must sometimes be the first to risk it. John Hancock understood that. He signed his name to it. Next on Pivot Points, he was an orphan, an immigrant, a boy who crossed the Atlantic with nothing but ambition and a mind that wouldn't stop. In the winter of 1789, alone at a desk by candlelight, Alexander Hamilton wrote 40,000 words that would either save the United States of America or prove it was never going to survive. His first report on public credit didn't just balance the books, it invented Wall Street, the bond market, the national bank, the entire financial system of the most powerful economy in human history. One man, one report. Everything changed. Alexander Hamilton, next on Pivot Points.